Guys, welcome to my first video. My name is RalphSobanski. I'm a photography enthusiast from Toronto. I don't do this for a living, but I do like to shoot, and I've been doing it for a long time now. And I've learned a lot of things along the way, and I want to show you a few of those things. Today we're going to process an image that maybe doesn't look so great right out of the camera, but we can still process it enough without really photoshopping it, as some would call it, to look like a great photo. Before we get started, guys, follow me on 500px, please. 500px.com/RalphSobanski. You can check out all the photos I post there. You can also take a look at my portfolio, RalphSobanskiPhotography.com. I've got quite a few images I've shot over the years here. Anyways, let's get started. So this is the photo we're going for. This is what we started with. The first thing we're going to do is something I learned from a guy named Serge Ramilly. He taught me that you have to find the white and black point if you really want to correct your photo properly. So to do that, what you do, by the way, we're using Lightroom 5 here. I'm on a Mac. I assume all the shortcuts are the same on a PC. I'll try to explain them as I go here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the highlights all the way down. And I'm going to bring the shadows all the way up so it kind of brightens everything, makes it really flat. Then I'm going to push the Option key on my keyboard, and I'm going to click on the whites, and I'm looking for my white point here. What you notice is if I go all the way to the right, it shows all the things, and if I were to let go, you can see all the highlights get blown out. If I go the opposite direction, everything gets black. So I'm trying to find a point where these little dots start to disappear, and I think it's about here. I'm going to do the same thing with my black, so if I start sliding over to the left, there we go. These are my buildings here. I don't care about the bottom because that's just water. I'm going to crop that part out. And there we go. They start to disappear right about here. So that's where I'm going to set my black point to. Then I'm going to boost my clarity. In this case, I'm going to go all the way up to 100, and mainly because this is far away, I want to bring out as much detail as I can out of this. I don't care about this stuff so much. I will crop this out. I shot a little too much on the left here. Not very interesting. So, but there's a reason I'm not cropping it just yet, and I'll show you the reason for that in a minute. Then we're going to play with our vibrance. If I really bring vibrance up, it goes super blue. I don't like it. If I go all the way to the left, it actually has a good look to it. I like where this is going, but it's probably a little too much. So I'm going to find a middle ground, about minus 50%. My saturation, I usually don't play with a whole lot. I leave it up to the vibrance. I don't like to oversaturate things. There we go. I'm going to go a little minus saturation as well in this case. And I can play with my highlights and my lowlights or my shadows here. I'm going to go about there. I don't want the sky to get blown out here. And with my lights, if I lighten the thing, that's probably a little too much. Just brighten the mood a bit. There we go, +7. I think that works. For my darks, I don't want to bring them out too much. It loses detail. I don't want to go too much. It's a little too much contrast. So I'm going to find something reasonable. I'd say that's about it. And my shadows, I really want to bring this stuff out. So if we zoom in, you can see that in here that there's no detail. It's kind of hard to see the detail here. I want to be able to print this thing really large, and I don't want these big black or white blobs coming out once this thing's blown up. So I'm going to bring my shadows down a bit. No, wrong way. Let's go the other way. I think that's about right. So this is what we have now. And if we click this on and off, pretty much for all your settings, you can just turn off that particular setting, in this case, tone curve. That's what we had before and after. I like the detail in here. There we go. So already we're starting to look much better than we started with. So if I go to before, you notice that the image was just blah. Now it's starting to look like something. So let's move on. Let's start with our color adjustments. There's really not a whole lot of color. Obviously, it's mainly blue here. There is some greens and reds, the brown and reddish building here. Let's see if I can turn those down just a bit, because I really like this blue look. So just ever so slightly, minus a little minus on the orange, and I'm going to bring the blue up just a little bit, right about there. Then if we get into our saturation, remember I said I don't really do a lot of saturation up here, but in here I can play with the individual colors as opposed to just saturating the whole image. So again, I'm going to take down my red and orange a bit, and I'm going to bring my blue up just a touch. Well, maybe a little more than a touch. About there. Okay, and I'm going to move on. Let's sharpen this thing. I'm going to start with 100. Let's zoom in here so you can see what I'm doing. Sorry, I'm going to turn that off. So you can see that these buildings are not overly sharp. Whereas when I put my 100, which some may think is a lot, it already brings the buildings out a lot. But it brings noise as well. So I'm going to turn down the noise just a little bit. There's not a whole lot of it here. And I'm going to bring it down by about 10. Now the rule is whatever you use for noise reduction, you got to subtract out of the 100. So in this case, it's going to be 90. And the last thing we want to do, let me just zoom out, is I want to mask some of this stuff. So I don't want to sharpen the whole image. I just want to sharpen the darker things. So I'm going to hit my Option key, and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to start sharpening. And you notice that when you're here, it's sharpening the sky and the water. I really don't care to sharpen either of those things, and it's sharpening everything in the buildings. Whereas if I start turning it down a little bit, the sky goes black, meaning it's not going to get sharpened, so does the water, and the buildings, just the details of the buildings start getting sharpened. So I think that's, yeah, right about there. Maybe a little too much. Let's turn it down. There we go. And that's it for sharpening. I really don't do much else there. Pretty easy. I get into lens correction. Now remember I said I wasn't going to crop this thing from the beginning. Had I cropped it, once I do this, it's going to uncrop it anyway. So I do this first, enable profile corrections, and that just fixes the imperfections in your lens. And I'm going to remove chromatic aberrations. There's usually none as far as I know, but I do it just in case. And then I'm going to hit auto on this thing. And what auto does is it's going to straighten everything for me. It's going to straighten the buildings, the perspective of them. It'll straighten the line as much as it detects it thinks is the right line. So that's already much better. And from here, I can actually crop it. So I'm going to use the rule of thirds. I'm going to get the CN Tower right on one of the lines. The cluster of downtown buildings are kind of on the other third. And I'm going to bring this up to give it more of a panoramic look. And there's my third and my third on the CN Tower. Everything intersects nicely. We haven't broken any rules here. The last thing I want to do before I hit enter is this angle tool, which I'm going to click on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, drag. And I'm just going to find the true balance. Right about there, I'm going to hit enter. And there we go. If we start again what we had and what we have, already we're getting somewhere. So we can close that. Now, camera calibration. I like to start with landscapes, mainly because that's what I shoot. And I know it's a cityscape, but I kind of consider that a landscape too. In this case, it looks terrible. My next go-to is the portrait, which works sometimes. A little better. This is my third one. Camera standard. I think that's about right there. Okay, so we can close that. We've done all these. Now we can get into the white balance. I think a lot of people make a mistake, and because these things are up top, they try to fix the white balance right off the beginning. I don't think it's a great idea because I end up adjusting them later again, so I just kind of leave it till the near end. If I go all the way to the left, obviously this is going to get really cold. It's going to, there it goes, look pretty terrible. If I go all the way to the right, it's going to make it really warm. And in this case, actually doesn't look terrible, but I probably don't want it this warm. So I'm going to go somewhere in the middle there. See what that looks like. I think that's the right balance there. With my tints, if I go really left, they're going to turn green on me, which is going to... it doesn't look terrible, but I don't like the look. If I go really magenta on the right, again, not the look I'm going for. So let's go back to where we started from. I'm going to boost it just by a couple. I think that's about right over there. Okay. Now, I think we've done most of our adjustments. So if we take a look, there's a big difference here. Maybe our exposure. Yeah, just a touch. Our contrast. No, we don't want to go too flat. We don't want to, oh, that hurts the eyes. Let's give it just a touch there. Okay. So let's get in. We're done with the basic stuff. Let's get in with a little brushing. Doesn't take long. I see some spots here. I was shooting right by the water. There was probably some splashing happening, and I'm assuming these are just wet spots that landed on, or drops on the lens. So I'm just going to get rid of those things. I'm going to take this tool right here. This is my clone tool, and I'm just going to click over these spots, and it's going to find an area that's a similar color and just correct itself, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and just click a few of these that I can see here. Some of the worst ones here. If I hit Z or Z, sorry, I'm Canadian. Just gonna zoom in a little bit, see if there's any others. I think that fixes it. So I'm gonna zoom back out. And from here, I'm going to use this gradient tool. What I want to do is separate these buildings, give them a little more depth so they look a little further away, I guess, or just deeper in there. So I'm going to darken the sky a little bit, and I'm going to hold my shift down. I'm going to pull down to right about there, and I'm just going to grab that, pull it down. And obviously, if you go a lot, it's going to darken the sky quite a bit. I don't want to go that much. I'm going to go about a stop, maybe just a little over, about there. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, holding the shift. I'm going to hit about the land line there. And maybe this bottom doesn't need as much, so I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. There we go. And again, if we turn it on and off, we can see we just created a lot more depth in there. So there we go. I think this image is pretty much done. So if we go back to what we started with, that looks pretty terrible. Whereas with a few minutes of corrections, and by the way, if you actually set a preset for yourself, which I've done here, just general adjustments, basically everything I did there, I just created a preset by hitting plus. I called it whatever. I took all the things I wanted. Maybe you don't want to take the crop here, and I hit create. I have that. So for the future, I literally just click that, and then I go in there and I do a few very quick adjustments for the white point, the black point, and I can come up with this color correction within under a minute. So this is the image I originally showed you guys. It has a little more contrast, I say, to it. The color is slightly different. I can adjust that if I really wanted to. Maybe I can go back here and play with this, possibly, if now with all our corrections, some of these might look a little more realistic. There's our portrait. I think I like that. So So anyways, guys, that's what we have. Thank you for watching. I do plan on uploading a lot more videos, so please subscribe. This is the first of many to come. I do plan on showing some shooting techniques, some more processing techniques, and so forth. Again, thank you for watching. Subscribe. I'll see you guys soon.